Hello, friends! Welcome back to another episode of Reddit ProRevenge. This episode contains 3 stories. The first story is about house stealing $3,000 that resulted in a $125,000 loss in the future. The second story is about how a lead video game designer deals with a petty lawyer in a creative way. Finally, the last story is about a family disowning their daughter and having it come back to bite them. I hope you stay for all these stories today and subscribe for future videos. Story 1. Had my half-brother removed from the will after he stole money from our father with Alzheimer's shortly after my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. My formerly estranged half-brother quit his job and moved in to help take care of my dad. Though there really wasn't enough money, it was agreed to pay him around $300 a week to make up for his missing income. During this time, my half-brother abruptly acquired power of attorney and usurped medical and financial decisions. Several documents relating to my dad's pension, which were now my half-brother's responsibility, were not turned in on time. This resulted in my dad missing out on a one-time payment of $8,000 and lowering his pension payout by $300 a month. My half-brother then cleaned out my dad's remaining savings, which was about $3,000. This wasn't discovered until a month later. 6 days afterwards, my father hung himself in the basement. My dad left all of his insurance money and belongings to my mother. Us children were left with only sentimental items. My half-brother was visibly upset and shaking when the will was read. He acknowledged that my mother was receiving everything and left. About a month later, we discovered the missing money. Though he broke no laws because he had power of attorney, we insisted he pay it back. We even offered to let him make payments over a 2-year period. He refused, and we've had no contact for 2 years now. Little did he know that he was in my mom's will, which was his stepmother's. He would have received half of what's currently a $250,000 estate. I suggested to my mother that she remove him from the will. She and I did, and now I'm the sole beneficiary. He stole $3,000, only to lose out on $125,000 later. Story 2. Oh my God, we're so sorry we blocked your doorway. Now go get your earmuffs. I've had a long and respectable career in game development. A couple of years ago, I abandoned it for a cushy corporate job, and now I spend most of my days missing game development. This story takes place about 10 years ago, at the apex of my career. I was the lead on a AAA project. Our parent company was going through changes, and we had to move offices 3 times in 1 year. The second of the 3 moves, always intended to be temporary, put us into the basement of an older building occupied by satellite departments not involved with development. The basement we were given had been empty for years, save for the most distant office. You enter the basement through a dimly lit staircase. Then, after you sneak through a horror movie-like maze of corridors and interconnected small rooms, you'd eventually arrive at the farthest room of all. A golden plaque was on the door that said Trademark Compliance Department. Literally no one I knew was ever aware of trademark compliance, even though trademarks were a pretty important part of everything we did. The department consisted of a single trademark attorney and his fresh-faced college grad assistant, or paralegal or whatever. The lawyer flipped his freaking lid when he learned that people were being moved into his basement for a couple of weeks. He tried desperately to prevent the move, getting all the way to the CEO. The tiny, leathery lawyer amazed everyone with his deep, booming voice that would climb and climb in pitch as he yelled, screamed, and threatened. All his efforts were for naught. Our stuff was moved into the basement over 1 weekend. We spent that following Monday and Tuesday dealing with all sorts of setup issues, low power outlets, network connections, and breathable air. On Wednesday, 2 quiet 2D artists came into their L-shaped room, the one with a fancy door to trademark compliance, and found that all of their stuff, chairs, desks, computers, everything, was pushed into the far corner. A walkway of caution tape was set up leading to the compliance door. While we were trying to figure out what had happened, a demigod VP, as close to the company CEO as it gets, walked into our lowly basement, trailed by the beaming lawyer. Apparently, our desks had blocked his door. He even had pictures. The demigod hadn't seen them prior to walking down. Once he saw dozens and dozens of close-ups of the desk corner, the VP's face grew less certain. Our desk was blocking his doorway by less than an inch on the side with the hinges. The door opened away from the desk. I'm guessing, even when opened at 90 degrees, the edge of the door was about as wide as the protruding part of the desk. In other words, it was technically blocking the doorway, but no more than the door itself. Non-committal as always, the demigod instructed us to make sure that all pathways were clear at all times, and that he expected this would be the last time he had to get involved. I apologized and told him I was moving 2 people out and moving just 1 person in, making sure it was as uncluttered as possible. The lawyer answered my apology with a triumphant, "Serves you right. That's what you get for messing with adults. Welcome to the real world, and this is far from over." He then ordered me to wait right there and came out with a tape measure. We snaked through his entire path from the staircase to his office, measuring clearance from desks, chairs, and people's items. The lawyer bumped into desks, monitors, garbage cans, and pushed people sitting in their chairs as if they were garbage cans. He crawled on the floor and marked out a no man's land in chalk. No one was ever allowed to block his pathway, or he'd have everyone's jobs. Once all the lines were drawn and the lawyer retreated to his fortress of smugness, I knew that our slightly unhinged physics programmer, with his anime posters and loud clank of his mechanical keyboard, would not be moving into the room at all. My revenge was going pro now. The issue of sound was discussed more than any other as we were planning the temporary move. Our sound designer had to listen to all sorts of sounds at full volume on different types of speakers, not just on his headphones. If the sound was designed on his headphones and you played it through surround sound speakers, you'd sense it. Our old office had a professionally soundproofed room. Even then, it was a pretty unpleasant thing. Huge sounds could not be heard, but they could be felt, like an inaudible earthquake striking with primal dread. So we discussed this on and on. I wanted a soundproof room, management wanted headphones. We eventually agreed on a compromise. We just had to accept screams and explosions on speakers while we were in the basement. This decision had also been made and approved by the same VP about a month before the walkway and chalk incident. You can see where I'm going with this. We made the walkway semi-permanent with construction tape. I took pictures and sent an email update to everyone, reporting that A, we pledged to keep all pathways cleared at all times, and B, the offending room would have 2 girls move out and have 1 sound designer move in. The VP replied with, "Thank you, that's great." Notice how the email listed sound designer in an offhand way. This was not my first rodeo. We moved the sound designer and all his equipment into the room. The next morning, explosions started, then stopped. High-pitched screams echoed in the distance, followed by footsteps. My door flew open, and the lawyer ran in, screaming, "What the heck?" He dragged me across the street to the VP's office. The VP was not there. The lawyer screamed, jumped, and stomped his little feet, left voicemails, then retreated to write an email to the VP, with a CC list that probably went all the way up to President Obama and the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. I quickly replied that 1. Sound design flaws and issues had been extensively discussed and were deemed a necessary evil. 2. I notified everyone before the fact that the sound designer was moving into that particular room. And 3. If I had to keep moving people around every day, I wouldn't be able to hit my milestones. The VP replied the next morning, saying, "He's right about the milestones. Besides, it's temporary anyway." And so, for the next 7 months, the compliance department was subjected to 8 hours a day of nonstop explosions, gunfire, screams, grunts, engine roars, and wet thuds. Once released, our game's sound was singled out for praise in multiple reviews. I put the lawyer's name somewhere in the thank you section in the credits. Story 3, Disowning Their Daughter, Regretting Forever. This basically happened like 3 weeks ago. I moved out from my mother's house since I was going off to university to study math and physics. My brother had a girlfriend who I really liked and respected. I soon accepted her as a part of my family. She used to spend a lot of time at our place because her parents were a nightmare. They were pretty poor, which doesn't have anything to do with them being horrible parents, just for context, but they were also stingy. Here in Germany, you'll get subsidized money each month for your child to buy them food, provide shelter, and warm clothes. Her parents didn't spend her child money on anything for her. She had to sleep in a dark, cold room, buy her own clothes, and got no pocket money. Meanwhile, her parents were gifting themselves smartwatches and laptops for Christmas. My brother's girlfriend had gotten a shampoo bottle with a discount label on it. The only money she got was from her job as a post girl. That job only amounted to 48 euros total a month, and her bus ticket would already cost her 58 euros. So she had to ask her mother to lend her something, which she would have to pay back. Her parents didn't want her to move out and go study. When she said she wanted to move together with my brother into the city where she had gotten an apprenticeship, her mom nearly exploded. She actually had hoped that her daughter wouldn't get the job so she could realize how stupid she was for wanting a good future for herself. You can imagine how much her parents hated my brother. Fast forward, I come home to stay a few weeks at home, visiting friends and relatives. She's a usual at our house, but my mother then told me that she was living here permanently, being registered exactly at my home address. I'm a little stunned, as I had suggested that very thing to her a few days before, and she said she didn't want to break ties with her family. But things changed when her mom tried to cut up her prom dress, which had been given by my mother as a present. She was furious about what her mother wanted to do. The mother just explained that since she never got such a nice dress, why would her daughter? My brother's girlfriend just called my brother. My mother then drove them to her house. They just packed up most of the stuff they could carry, and the mom's last words were, "You can always come back to us when he's beaten you black and blue. We love you." They pretty much tried to badmouth my brother in front of her and everyone. Since that day, she's been living with us. Now comes the justice. Since my mother is really good with law and legal stuff, we've gotten her parents to pay her the child money that they've taken from her and owed her. We also requested money support for her since she has no income. She's only 18, so she'll get a lot of money, plus her child money back paid, the apprenticeship earnings, and a little extra from our family. After a few days, her parents realized that they were in a lot of financial debt and had to pay her back 4 months of child support, which they couldn't. They pleaded for the amount to be halved, which my brother's girlfriend could have agreed to, but she just took a pen and wrote, "Screw that," crossed out their plea and put it back into the envelope. She now doesn't have anything to do with her family anymore, who tried through multiple means to get to her. She rocks! Story 4. My grandmother's revenge. My grandmother got married in 1962 to a young man in the military. For a wedding present, their parents bought them a house in a nice suburb, white picket fence, the whole 9 yards. Not long after they moved in, the next-door neighbor planted a mulberry tree on the side of his property near my grandparents' driveway. Nothing seemed amiss, but if you know mulberry trees, you know things are about to get real. About 15 years later, the mulberry tree was obnoxious. The birds would come and eat the berries, and any car parked in the driveway would get splattered with droppings that would stain the cars and ruin paint jobs. My grandmother, upon realizing the culprit, baked a nice apple pie, walked next door, and asked the neighbor if he'd mind trimming back the branches of the tree that hung over her driveway. He told her not to worry, that he'd get to it soon. 3 days later, my grandmother opened the door to find a half-eaten pie on the plate, crawling with ants, and a note that said, "I changed my mind." My grandmother threw out the pie, cursing up a storm and swearing up and down that she'd get him to trim that tree or get him back. City ordinance said that she could not trim the tree, as the roots were on his property, so the whole tree was his property. As the years went by, my grandmother repeatedly asked him ever so nicely to trim it back. His responses were always along the lines of, "No," and "get lost." Finally, in the mid-90s, my grandmother retired and received a large bonus from her employer for 35 years of work. She took the money and bought an empty lot on the other side of the neighbor. Then she went to a nursery and bought 16 mulberry trees, planting them along her property line on both sides of his property. About 3 years ago, he became angry at the damage they were doing to his cars and cut them all back without permission. My grandmother took him to court, and he was forced to reimburse her for the trees at a markup price because they'd had 10 years to grow. Story 5. My father's revenge against the neighborhood punks. This story's a little old, taking place around 2000 or so. Anyway, during that summer there was a rash of punks who would go and vandalize houses, cars, and pretty much anything else they could get their hands on to cause ruckus. It was so bad that they would keep stealing hubcaps off my father's Grand National, as well as try to get in to steal the radios and change. He was forced to keep the doors unlocked, as it was cheaper than them breaking the windows. The police would always take their sweet time getting there. It would take 20 minutes or more to send one officer, even though I could walk to the station in that amount of time. By then, the kids would have run off and gotten away. My father is an engineer by trade and decided to get back at them. Right after he replaced the hubcaps, they would be back there the next night to take them. My father went to the hardware store and bought some wires, razor blades, and he grabbed a few car batteries that he had in the garage. What he did was truly diabolical. He took a little glue, and on the inside of the door handles, he glued on the razor blades. I'll let you picture what would happen to the thieves' fingers if they went to try to grab the door handles to open the door. Next, he stripped some of the wires he got and wrapped them around the hubcaps, making sure they were pressed tight against them. He took another wire and used a little tape and glue to have the wire hovering over the wires so that if someone were to grab them, it would complete the circuit and either burn or shock them. He connected them and went inside. That night, my father left the windows open slightly so he could listen for them. Sure enough, sometime after midnight, those little troublemakers came back. After a few yells, they seemed to have left rather quickly. The morning revealed a fair amount of blood on the vehicle handle, which trailed down the driveway. One of the hubcaps melted slightly from the heat, but the others were not triggered. Needless to say, they didn't come back after that one. I just wished we had a security system that also had a camera so we could watch those morons get it. Story 6. Stole my iPod, have a custom virus. This all took place many years ago when I was a freshman in high school. I had bought an iPod Nano with money that I had earned by helping my neighbor, and I was pretty protective of it because I didn't make much money at the time. My scumbag sister had also recognized that it was worth a few $100s. As I later found out, she had stolen it to use and then given it to a friend temporarily until the heat was off. I suspected this immediately when it wasn't on my desk where I knew I left it. I asked my parents if I had done something that warranted a punishment, but neither had touched it. Clearly, I needed evidence to pin my sister. As a freshman, I was pretty computer savvy at the time. I was learning a few programming languages and had a good feel for novice hacking. Nothing serious, but enough to get into trouble at school kind of thing. I got to work on a spy tool. My plan was to get into her email and Facebook, where I'd hoped to find evidence. At the very least, I could mess up her account and get revenge. A few hours of work later, the program was done, and it was way more than a simple spy tool. Although I honestly had no idea how to make a spy tool at the time, I damn sure knew how to write a batch file that would mess up your Windows partition 6 ways to Sunday. I basically had written a carpet bomb that had the same icon as Internet Explorer. The virus was armed when you replaced the default IE.exe file with a malicious file that shared the same file name and icon. Of course, when you went and clicked on the icon, you set it off. The original file would be launched after the virus ran, so everything was still usable. Of course, my original goal still carried out. I had packaged in a simple keylogger that recorded the keystrokes that any decent antivirus would have noticed instantly. But once my sister was out of the house, there was nothing stopping me from ripping her antivirus out by the roots, which I did, and then planted the virus. A few hours later, she came home and hopped onto her computer, logged in, opened internet, checked Facebook and email. This was before Twitter, I guess, and so on. But today was a little different. She probably didn't notice. But Internet Explorer lagged a little when she opened it. That was because Internet Explorer had to execute a few little things before it extracted and then launched the real browser application instance. A few files marked hidden with innocent names were copied to her startup folder, waiting to execute at the next login. The keylogger was embedded deep into the system and started right up, and within a minute her passwords were saved in a protected log file. She was completely unaware, of course. That all changed in about 20 minutes. The virus, which was running in the background, ran a fake error message that caused the reboot. It said, "There appears to be a beaver dam obstructing your flow of internet connection. Code red. Reboot required." She was somehow stupid enough to not instantly realize that this was some sort of malware and spyware and just patiently waited for the log-on screen. As soon as she logged back in, the hidden startup files ran, and she was greeted with some weird message. An important-looking command prompt, which was busy doing important things like deleting system files and corrupting the registry. Suddenly, she was getting weird errors about things like her hard drive being jammed with peanut butter, and Windows has detected an intelligence deficit in user. Consider a system upgrade, complete with an annoying beep noise every time she tried to close it. Her CD tray kept popping open no matter how many times she closed it. She even got a snarky message that said, "Put it in me, babe," every time it opened back up. Meanwhile, in the background, a small script uploaded the keylogger file to my FTP account and deleted the keylogging portion, as well as the hidden startup files, in case an investigation was done. Naturally, this triggered her mashing the power button and waiting for the screen to turn off. She knew something wasn't right. As soon as she had the log-on screen, everything was 640 by 480 resolution at this point. She asked me to come fix it because I was the computer nerd in the house. I had to contain my laughter. I said, "Just try logging in," and she said, "This is really weird. I have no idea why this would happen." The desktop was a beautiful pixel collection featuring 256 colors, that was a lot a couple of decades ago, and barely distinguishable icons. Her theme was set to Windows Classic, which she hates with a passion. Unfortunately for her, I had plans with a friend and couldn't help her with her computer. Sorry about that. All program files and hardware drivers were gone, so she had no luck running a browser amidst the chaos or even getting an internet connection in the first place. In the end, I got my iPod back the next day and asked for it back. Naturally, she claimed not to have it. She didn't know that I had read her Facebook messages and already knew that her friend had it. I asked my parents right in front of her, "Can you ask her to show her Facebook messages so she can clear herself?" Sure enough, she broke down and said that she was just borrowing it. Obviously, my parents forced her to show the messages, which clearly proved how it was a little more than borrowing that she had in mind. My dad recommended that she have someone fix her laptop. Luckily, I was around to do it, and for $20 I would be happy to reinstall Windows. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was how I got even with my sister. I'm so sorry this is a bad novel, but I hope you enjoyed it. Story 7. Run over my traffic cones every day? Enjoy your busted-up car. I work on trees, and sometimes I have to do blocks and blocks of trees near the street. When this happens, I put up all the correct signage, which is usually a men in tree sign and a few lane closed ahead signs. My crew works pretty fast and safe. Well, every day when we would take lunch, we would be sitting under a tree, eating our lunch. It's much faster and more efficient for us to just leave the work zone up while we're eating. One day, this jerk decided it would be funny to start running over the cones in the taper. That's the row of cones that starts from the curb and goes at an angle to try to force people into one lane. This started on a Monday, and every day, this jerk would come by and run over the cones and laugh at us while we were all sitting down taking lunch. So one of us would have to walk a few blocks to go retrieve the cones, and it basically messed up our lunch and work zone. Well, come Wednesday, I had enough. I went to my local hardware store and bought a few 80-pound bags of Quikrete and some great stuff spray foam. I took 2 of the cones home and filled the top 2 inches of the cones with the foam and went and had a beer while it dried. Then I proceeded to mix up the Quikrete into the cones. I let it sit overnight. The next morning I realized that I mixed it too wet and it would have to dry another day. I was kind of upset that I would miss my revenge, but sure enough, the jerk came again. So, on Friday, I take the cones to work and set up the work zone. The first 2 cones are normal, and the last 2 are concrete-filled cones. Lunchtime comes, and the jerk drives by, and the whole crew's watching. He notices, and he's going extra fast, knowing that he has our attention. The first 2 cones went pop-pop. Then the first concrete cone dents his bumper pretty good, goes under the tire and gets stuck in the wheel well. Then he hits the second one, smashes up the bumper, and drives over it. He speeds off pretty quickly, most likely thinking, "What just happened?" He was in such a hurry that he didn't notice that his oil pan got ripped off. Enjoy your hopefully locked-up engine. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed these stories today. Also, if you aren't subscribed, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. See you guys in the next one.